All right, welcome to The Boost, conversations with people promoting mental health. And I am elated to be here with Reggie D. Ford, who I've talked with in the past. We've gotten coffee and we have really deeply connected. So we'll talk about so many things, the memoir he's written, the work he's done, his own personal experience, and he's really an open book. So it's a real treat to have you here, Reggie. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Steve. Thank you for having me. This is an honor, and we've connected in a short amount of time, and it's genuine soul connection here. So I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, it's genuine and it happens fast. I feel it already. So
Yeah.
we do two things to kick off every podcast episode. You'll notice we're in a brand new studio. So we said if we're bringing Reggie D. Ford on, we got to level up from my
I
home-rolled
appreciate
office.
that. I'm humbled by that. No.
No, it's just been cool. It's been cool because we're talking about a number of ways we can work together in the new year. So let's kick it off with the virtual hug and the shameless plug. So the
Yeah.
virtual hug is tell us somebody or something you're grateful for today.
Since I just left a therapy session, I'm going to say I'm thankful for therapy, and in particular, my therapist, Lucy. She's been with me on my journey for a little bit over 2 years now, and just the relationship that we've been able to develop, and the vulnerability that I've been able to express with her and heal through that has been amazing. And so, shout out to you, Lucy.
That's amazing. Thank you, Lucy. You're amazing, obviously. Yeah, therapy has changed my life too. I mean, I wouldn't be here without an engagement with an LPC down here in Brentwood, Tennessee.
There you go.
That
Yeah.
put me on. I mean, that took me off of what I call the competitive path, this pressing, forcing path toward the fork in the road, and then onto the creative path that led me toward creating things of value for people in need. And this is an attempt to do that, is conversations highlighting people like you. It's really like shine the spotlight on this person that I want my network to know about. A lot of people know about you, but I want my network to know about you.
Definitely. You're doing more than attempting. You're executing it. And it's beautiful to see. Like, I love what you said. Like, the competition, I think, is when we look at the world and scarcity, is like there's only so much for us to have. We see ourselves competing with everybody. But when you get into that creative space, I think it's more of a spiritual space. And it's abundant, and it's out here for us all. So you could do a podcast. I could do a podcast. We all could share in the beauty that everything has to offer in the world. And so you're doing it. I love it.
I used to have that clinging to scarcity and to this feeling like it was either win or nothing, you know, like, and to the point where I would see other people's success early on, and probably jealousy is probably the the experience I was having, and that comes from a sense of, oh well, I couldn't have that, I can't have that, and that's not the case.
Yeah.
And I believe that's not the case.
Yeah. I think so much of our society is built to have that mindset. I mean, growing up playing sports, it was win, right? It was like, you got to win. If you win, there is a lot of validation. There's a lot of applause and cheers for that. And if you lose, you feel that on the same. And so it was built and ingrained to win, to dominate, to kill. All the words that we have around being successful are very, conquering in a way. And so it's built into our society, and I love that you have the awareness and consciousness to just live above that.
Yeah. I mean, you were a D1 football player. You operated at a high level. You in sports.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about some of your other experience. Let's do that actually. Let's go shameless plug right now, just to drop the context on what you're working on, and then I've got a follow up.
Yeah, I think what kicked off so much of my platform and talking to people in this format was my book, Perseverance Through Severe Dysfunction. PTSD is that acronym where I chronologically go through my life and events that led to my PTSD that shaped me in many different ways and built resilience in me at the same time. And I think the whole book is it's like there's pain, but then there's peace. There's there's trauma and triumph. It's a resilience story, and it's about the redemption of hard things that come up in life, and how do you turn that to see the positives that we can get out of everything without being toxic positivity. Like, own it. It's pain. It hurts. Shit is real, but there are lessons in all of that. And so I look at my life, and there's kind of this framework throughout where it's normalization, realization, liberation, where I go through the periods of life where the trauma, the ways of thinking, the mindset, it was normalized to be pretty bad, poor. And then getting to a place of realization where you look back at that and say, man, maybe some of those things that I normalized weren't quite normal or healthy. And then ultimately and hopefully for us all, when you go through that, you find a place of liberation where you can break free from the ways that society has programmed us, or the conditioning that you grew up within your household or wherever, your community, to find some peace of mind. And that's been the journey that I've been on since 2019. And so that's been amazing. But the book has led to speaking. I'm a keynote speaker. I've been all over the country. I got to Ghana this year, which was amazing. And just continuing to do that and share my voice from stages has been rewarding for me. And I close my eyes and I pinch myself, because I grew up as a very shy kid, didn't want to talk about anything with anyone, but now I'm doing that. And then that's leading into, we want more. What is that more? So it's coaching, it's workshops, it's leading individuals and groups in their wellness and resilience journey. So yeah.
And it takes that realization. I mean, it came to mind when you were talking. There's a quote by Jung, and he says something to the effect of, a tree can't reach up to heaven unless the roots reach down to hell. There's like this natural element of moving from your normalization to this realization, this awareness, this eye-opening, where maybe I've had this experience where I was blind for a while, figuratively speaking, and then all of a sudden I got some transparency through doing some hard work and just growing up and care and help from a therapist. And then it was amazing, because I could start to see through myself. I got clarity and transparency, and then also started to see into and through other people, and maybe some stories they were telling themselves at certain points that maybe, I could live in grace with, just because I could totally see where you're coming from. I am and was there too.
Yes. I think that's been one of the things that I remind myself of as I evolve is, whenever I am talking to someone or addressing an audience, it's like I'm talking to a younger version of myself in that audience. And it doesn't have to be all 5,000 people in here. It only has to be one, and impact that one life. And that person goes on to impact the life or just change their life. And yeah, it's so much of that grace. You said grace. And I think that is something that I've had to learn throughout my life. And when in writing the book, I've always written. It's always been a form of creative expression, vulnerable expression that I kept to myself. But in writing the book in particular, I gained such a deep level of grace and compassion for people that are in the book, and for just people in general, understanding that we are going through a human experience, and it is challenging, it's rewarding, it is up, it's down, it's all of that, and that we're all trying to do the best that we can with what we've been dealt. And so grace is a huge part of my life now.
Yeah, that's a powerful word for me too. So coaching, writing, keynote speaking, traveling the world. Let's get even a little more personal. How would you say the mental health experience, and you touched on it, but I wanted to circle back to it. It's such a big phrase, such a big kind of word, but what's it meant to you in your life, and especially when you kind of went from normalization to realization? Where were you at?
So I would say there were glimmers of realization throughout my life. Growing up, I was born to a 14-year-old mother. My father was in the picture when I was a child, and then he eventually ended up in prison. And I'm in the household with a grandfather who was 33 years old when my grandmother was 15 when they had my mom. And so there's a lot of just dysfunction already in that picture. And I was born into a lot of trauma, violence, abuse from in the house and then outside of the house. And mental health wasn't a concept. We didn't talk about it. It was real and it was happening and it was affecting people were being affected by the things that they were experiencing, but we didn't talk about it. And there was no space for me as the young boy and eventually the oldest man in the house at 3 years old to express myself and my feelings and have room or capacity for mental health. And so what it did for me was I had trauma responses, but those were applauded by society. I was a people pleaser. I was a caregiver. I was a perfectionist. I was the one that was going to work himself to the bone and sacrifice all that was in me for the world. And that got me elevated and promoted, and that got me pushed on to new heights. And it was being tucked away. And then the one of the glimmers of realization was in college being introduced to the adverse childhood experiences study, and I'm going through and I'm answering all 10 of the questions. And I answered initially, I like to tell it how it was for real. I answered initially 9 out of 10. And I'm like, okay, what does this mean? And I say initially 9 out of 10 because there was one question that I still carried so much shame about that I didn't even want to own up to it for myself. And that was the sexual trauma question. And that had been a part of my experience as well. And so it ended up being 10 out of 10 if I was being honest with myself and the world. And looking at how those experiences correlated to the health outcomes, physical health, mental health, social, all of that, I was like, oh my God. And the one that really scared me was, I think it's 6 or more ACEs, your life expectancy is decreased by 20 years. And I was like, no. I'm already in college. I'm probably halfway through my life if that's the case. And so that got me to thinking, and it was just a glimmer. And then it didn't truly kick in until 5 years ago. 2019, I was with my grandmother around this time of the year. It would be eerie if it was today.
Is it today?
Today.
Yeah.
5 years ago, or 6 years ago today, my grandmother was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. And she had been the rock for me, the nurturer, the love, unconditional love, and started to deal with her decline. In the midst of that, chaos ensued with family and literal, homicidal threats that I'm trying to just be a referee to, people please, and make sure we keep the peace. And it all ended up backfiring on me somehow, and I was just in a terrible position, feeling abandoned, feeling alone, and I had an anxiety attack, a panic attack, a mental health breakdown. And all the coping mechanisms that I had leading up to that weren't working. I couldn't write. I couldn't make music. I couldn't talk to my grandmother. I couldn't do all these different things that I had done over my life. Football was gone. And so I had to figure it out. And again, trauma, triumph, it's redemption. I was on the floor and I was crying one night, and it was just, I was incoherent. I was whispering. I was laughing. I was screaming. My wife was looking at me she had never seen me in that position. She says I'm the most resilient person she's ever met, and I had never been in that position, and I had never felt what I had felt in that moment. And I had this out-of-body experience where I saw myself, and I was like, how in the world did you end up here? You did all the things right, but, when it came to that question in interviews, name a time that you had failed, I always struggled with that because I honestly hadn't failed, and maybe that meant I didn't push myself to certain limits, but I failed myself from addressing the mental health issues that I had experienced in my life. And that became apparent, and waking up or getting up off that floor was the sign that something needed to change.
Yeah. I mean, we can't be just bright side. You know, there's no completion, and in this darkness, you're seeing these glimmers throughout some of life, and then it kind of comes to a head.
Yeah.
And that's maybe the moment where things begin for you in a lot of ways, where it is maybe some sort of rock bottom.
I was going to say that you hear rock bottom, you hear about it, and you have a perception of it. And I'm looking out and I'm, okay, it's probably I've lost a home and I'm out of money and in the relationship. And it wasn't that for me. Like, things were going well in many aspects of life, but in the parts that ended up being the priority, they were going poorly. And so it was a rock bottom for me. And I had to bounce back from that because I didn't want to experience that for myself. And then part of the advocacy work and the stuff that I do now is like, I don't want anybody else to be in that position. Like, if we can prevent that, I want to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's important.
Soft landing. I mean, the upside of rock bottom is that there is a tremendous amount of support, but there's a tremendous amount of force sometimes for ourselves to get to that point where if you can round that out, if you can soften that landing or catch it proactively, preemptively, you know, that's what you're out here trying to do with your advocacy. Let's man, I could talk to you for hours. Let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with more from Reggie D. Ford.
We live in a world built to connect us, but it can feel like it's designed to divide us, to distract us, to keep us disconnected from ourselves, from our relationships, from our passions, and from our own humanity. We have the world at our fingertips, and yet we wonder, is this all there is? We are afraid of missing out, but maybe more afraid of what fully showing up might really mean. Maybe we're right to ask the question, maybe this isn't all there is. Maybe we feel disconnected from the world because we are disconnected from the world within ourselves. But what if we move beyond our fear of being found out and found out that we can be seen, known, and valued, not for what we do, but for who we are? What if we could remember who we were before the world told us who to be? What if the life we truly want to live is waiting for us to come home to ourselves? We believe that building a more connected world starts with reconnecting to our most authentic selves. We believe that resilience, self-awareness, empathy, and compassion aren't just possible for us all. They are the building blocks of health, healing, and happiness. And when we reconnect to the world inside of us, we reconnect the world.
All right, we're back with Reggie D. Ford and a lot more. We were over the break chatting, and I was just saying we shouldn't have ever gone to break. We should just keep talking because we got into so many things, inner child and all of this. And so, you know, picking up from where we were talking before, just so we don't lose the audience. So you are going through this. You've had this realization of ACEs in your life. And you're going from trauma to triumph. So talk about the triumph part of that. What were those wins along the way? Was it up and to the right all the way? You know, and along the way, you're also like giving world-class financial advice to celebrities, and you're doing all these other things, which is such a great point, I think, in your life because rock bottom can look so different, you know, and just because you're succeeding doesn't mean there's other things in your life where you need to crack the door open and get into. But talk about that transformational, triumphant experience in your own life?
Yeah, and I love that you said like people could be succeeding, and now I challenge the definition of success. And if it doesn't incorporate my mental and emotional well being, then it's not success. So amount of money, status, whatever. If it doesn't include that, then it is not success to me. But it started early with I was a very great student academically. I was gifted. I could remember anything. I could do all of it, and that got me into a private school, Montgomery Bell Academy. Shout out NBA, Roll Red,
Yay.
and I did really well there. And I don't think many people knew what the stress that I was under while I was there, and how that stress though fueled me to be the student that they saw showing up with a smile on his face every day and making straight A's. That led to being the first person in my family to go to college. Well, neither of my parents graduated, so to graduate was a huge goal of mine, and then to go to college, and then I went to Vanderbilt. I walked on and I played football, and that was an amazing experience to get to play for some great coaches, Bobby Johnson, James Franklin, who's killing it right now. I hope he wins him a national championship, and just to make that leap and be successful from the traditional sense in those areas, to then get a master's degree and then start a career in finance and accounting and working for one of the biggest companies in the entire world, to then starting my own company. And it was all it happened so fast. When I'm like just recounting that, it happened so fast, but it all felt like that was the path and the journey that I was supposed to be on. And when I started the company, Rosecrete Wealth Management, and the name is important because it is an epitome of my life. And the name derives itself from the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete. Right? You see all the perceived impossibilities, the poor soil, little light, little water, that rose. It doesn't say, oh, I'm going to give up under this concrete. I'm going to grow. And it grows and it breaks through and it shines and it reaches the sun. And when we see the rose, it's not productive to comment on the blemishes and the damaged petals and the way it's leaning. It's like, oh my God, we marvel at its tenacity to reach the sun. Mm-hmm. And that has been epitome of my life. And I wanted to celebrate that in my life and in the lives of so many other people. And again, working with professional athletes, working with some of the world's most financially successful people in the world, it felt like what I was supposed to be doing, the drive, the go, like I was just on go. And I started to get recognized for the work that I was doing early on. Nominated for Forbes 30 Under 30. I was top 30 under 30, 40 under 40 in Nashville. And then I was on the floor a couple days after all of that. And that anxiety attack that I talked about, all of that stuff was happening, and all of the success. I was probably on the floor getting congratulatory texts and messages and all of this, and I'm miserable. And so it was a roller coaster of sorts. So it's like, okay, we're going through this trauma, but we're pushing it and we're numbing it and we're actually using it as fuel to now you're seeing success from the traditional sense. It's still fueling you and you still haven't done anything with it. And then it just like comes crashing down like a brick. And I feel like with the awareness and with the addressing those things now, we're on the way back up, baby.
On your way back.
Yeah.
And it's a process.
Yes.
It's a journey.
Always.
There's change management
Always.
involved.
Always.
I heard something recently about, there's different addiction and treatment centers. And I think one of the biggest indicators for success is how long the care or a version of the care can continue with you after the initial 30-day kind of detox, and sort of a lot of insurance companies and payment things, they'll see you through the first 30 days of that. And then it's a little bit like, oop, you're kind of on your own. But it takes us time to build the muscle. And the mind is part of the body. There's physical elements of that. But there's also this element of It's one of my favorite authors. His name is Nassim Nicholas Taleb. And he's written some great books. One is called The Black Swan, which is not the ballet story, but it's about like how the unknown surprises us sometimes. And an example of the black swan is the turkey who keeps getting fed every day. It's like, oh man, life is good. Life is really good, and then one day, Thanksgiving happens. And so he says this thing, which is what doesn't kill us doesn't necessarily make us stronger, but it does kill other people sometimes. So you are under a tremendous amount of stress. And stress is one of those, it's one of those killers.
Yes.
Like we just know that. But you are performing at such a high level. And I think there's a spectrum or a nuance of that, because we put our muscles under stress to get stronger. We are resilient.
Right.
And so it's not to say, well, we just need a stress-free life. You just need to
need some stress.
like you just need to be in a spa every day, all day, and that's zen. Like that is not the mountaintop. I think there's this walk balance in between, this third way between stress and relief. And but never, bending but not breaking. Where it's one thing to get a bicep ripped, it's another thing to break your arm.
Right.
So, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just it's a signal that something needs to be healed. And so you're on the floor. You could be the strongest athlete in the world. You break your arm, you're kind of like gonna be crying like a baby. It's like you don't need to be ashamed of that. That's like the right response.
Yeah, it's a part of it, and that's a good point that you made. Of we treat I say our job as advocates and mental health professionals out there, like it's not done until we're treating, and it's never done. But we have to treat our mental health with the same respect that we give our physical health. And if I've injured myself, torn Achilles, broken hand, like there have been injuries, and the medical professionals, they tend to those with urgency, and they have ways of treating them. And nobody in the world would look at me and be like, "Oh, you got a boot on your leg because you tore your Achilles." Like, no. But when we need that boot for our brain health, for our minds, then it carries a stigma. And I think that it's just it for me in the where I'm at in my journey now. It's like, where did that happen? Because like you said, the brain and the mind is a part of the body, and it interacts with everything. It moves everything. It is a part of it all. And so just treating that with the same respect that we give our physical is so important.
Yeah, we don't understand nearly enough about it. And it'll be fascinating as we get technology good enough and advancements in medicine and things that will help us unravel the universe that's in between our ears, because there is going to be something to that. And the physical health, mental health, I think we're spiraling toward that, and spiritual health as well. But from a healthcare perspective, we've left the mind out in the cold at the last silo that we want to look at. I mean, orthopedics, oh man, you'll hammer checks
all day long,
all day.
All day.
You'll fix hips, and they're amazing hips. Like it's like my dad is walking around again, new hip.
They give people quality of life, which is a part of it. It helps your mental health too.
Yeah, but I mean, but there's a big part of, and this is a very complicated topic, so I can't say. And I'm also very fortunate. I've spun the big wheel of life, and I have not landed on child pancreatic cancer. And people do, and it's like there's that you can't ever control. So I realize that I'm fortunate in my life, and we tax ourselves tremendously sometimes. Simply, maybe it's my ignorance. I just don't know what I don't know, and learning, having my eyes open to information and education is powerful. How I work, who I am, learning about myself has been quite the adventure in the journey, and there's a lot we can do to take care of ourselves and, make better decisions. It's like when you said, when you were in that rock bottom moment, you said, I had an out of body experience. I heard or read he's like a neuroscience, or he's a neurosurgeon.
Okay.
And he described the brain as like you watching Einstein riding a wild horse. which is quite the, but we're like so inside it. But he's like, no, you're actually like way up. If you can get to it, you're like way up here watching your like your logical part of your brain, your frontal neocortex. Like, man, I'm a fax machine. Here's some fax machine information. And then there's this wild stallion that's just like Einstein just trying to hang on to, which is like, so it's complex is the point. And so it's like, we don't need to be ashamed that it's very complex.
At all. I got a question for you.
Yeah.
What has been one of the most fascinating things that you've learned about yourself in your journey?
One thing was, certainly going to therapy for myself and seeing through myself, and then being able to see through other people's stories a little bit. And that was one point. I think how much of life, if you're given the opportunity, happens after 40 for me. Like I went to a monastery when I turned 40, and that feels like the day my life started.
Wow.
Because of the experiences I had around just the time in life that it takes to develop enough experiences. Like in my 20s, I love to write too. I had nothing to say in my 20s. I would try to write, and other than like funny stuff, like it just nothing was there. And then in my 30s, I was enriched, and in my 40s, I have perspective enough to share. And I also have that one individual, 22-year-old Steve, 25-year-old Steve, who I speak to a lot.
Yeah.
And I also think about 80-year-old Steve a lot. Like what's important to him, because he's coming, and every day he's a little closer. And so if and when I get the chance to be 80-year-old Steve, hopefully I've played long games and invested. But I think the main thing is agency life is when I went to therapy, being able to answer or being able to ask the question, what if most of this is my fault? And you cannot be a victim and ask yourself that question.
Right.
And that was the transformation from victimhood to ownership.
Yes.
Which is the transformation of first you want ownership, own your shit is like what I say. Because then it transformed into, through the help of this guy who does a lot with psychedelics, and I haven't tried psychedelics, but I may be interested in that, or I am interested in maybe doing that. He said, what if you reframe that question as like, not what if this is all your fault, but what if this is all your creation?
Wow.
Because you are making this happen. And what is a creator, know? And so that was a mind trip for me that I sat with forever.
We create our lives. And I think similarly, one of the things that I pulled from my journey was seeing the role that I played in each and every instance. And not that it was perpetrator, victim, like every time, but I played a role. And I didn't always put myself in a role that I was playing. And understanding what that role was, how that was serving me or the other person, or disserving either of us. And when you have that level of humility, one, to ask that question,
you're in the mud.
and you start to grow, and you start to. That's where grace comes from, because you won't have to give grace to yourself for those instances of what you controlled, what your impact was on a situation. But then when whatever you're able to do to yourself, you can reflect out to the world and project out to the world. And that's grace, that's love, that's all of it. And so I love what you just said, and I'm grateful for your experience. And when the psychedelic ceremony happens, I want to hear before, during, and after. Maybe not during, but after.
You'd be great, because that's one of the magic pieces is being a safe place with people who care about you.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's,
I will be a sitter for you anytime. Seriously. Like, I would love that. I
the
would
right
love
dosage, the right, and again, I have more research and homework to do on that. But I would love to have you there for that. That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
This is a new segment, actually, for your audience members. It's called The Boost, which is also the name of the podcast. But in this boost, it's what are you doing for yourself? So I know you're on the board at Small World Yoga. Do you do the yoga discipline? And what are you doing for your own mental health?
Yeah. For my own mental health, one, I would say is yoga, and I've been practicing yoga for 10 years now, which is unreal to think about. And it has given me benefits, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual benefits long before I knew that that was happening. And so I committed to it because it healed some of the physical ailments that I had, but then it started to transform my life. And so yoga is a huge part, and I practice at Small World. Check us out, Small World Yoga, if you're ever in Nashville. And I'm on the board there too, so I like to just give back in any way that I can. I'm certified to teach too. But meditation has been a huge part of my journey because, like I said earlier, I was on go. And go became the default. And I didn't realize that I rarely ever gave myself time to just be. Like, I love that silence right there. Like, keep that silence. Like, that silence, we don't allow it. We have phones that we are, constantly looking at. We have distractions with TV, with the noise, with everything. And it's just like, can you just be and be silent and allow your nervous system a break?
Yeah, that's one of the great miseries in our life is our inability to do that. Sit with ourselves in a silent room.
In a silent room. And so, like, meditation, if you have misconceptions about it and you want to rid your mind of all the things, it's not about that. But, can you bring your awareness to actually where you are, what you're thinking? Can you focus on a specific thing, and anytime your mind drifts off of that, can you bring your focus back? And when your mind drifts off, that's an opportunity. That's a rep. It's like, oh, I drifted off. That's a rep. You're getting stronger. And so I love meditation. It's been huge for my life, especially as the anxiety started to increase. I didn't feel anxiety. I didn't know what anxiety was as a younger person, but then it was like, oh, it's almost crippling. It is crippling at times. And it's like, okay, when I'm emotionally anxious, I just sit still. When there's more things to do than I can count, I sit still. I do nothing. And that's been beneficial. And then I drinking water, sleeping, but nature. I have to say nature, because if ever I am in a funk, feeling depressed, feeling anxious, I will go in nature, maybe a camping trip or just a walk in the park, and to hear the birds, to see the trees, to feel the breeze. That does so much for my system and gets me back grounded and centered. And so get out in nature because it's so important.
Powerful, yeah.
Yeah.
Meditation, yoga, getting out in nature.
Yeah.
Drinking water.
Drink your water. Get your sleep. Like,
yeah,
we don't sleep.
It's the basics. It is the basics.
Yeah.
And some of that goes back to us being having a kid inside of us. There's I've got a 9-year-old, and she's wonderful, and you get to see a lot of kids when you have one. Typically, they're involved with different activities, and you just get to see the range of kids. And some are just so tired, and some are so hungry. And some come up to you and say, could you just please give me a glass of water?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you're probably running off of Skittles and Lucky Charms.
Right.
And and I'm not like judging any experience. It's like, I'm just saying there are some fundamental foundational things that, here we are as adults, and it's still kind of the basics. It's like, well, did you have a walk in the park today? Did you get your water?
Yes.
And, that's not going to solve every mental health or mental illness crisis, things like that. I hate that I've got to wrap this conversation because we could hang out here all day. I do like the hat, by the way.
Oh,
Thank you for repping the hat, mental
yes,
health advocate.
Gotta represent.
We'll zoom in on that.
Yeah.
It looks good on you. Before we go, tell us some piece of content. It could be a book. It could be a book you're writing. It could be an article, a podcast, blog, album, song, something that you're into lately.
Do we got enough time for me to read something?
Yeah, we do.
Well, I was gonna say piece of content. I did a TEDx talk recently on the power of self-love, how self-love heals what self-improvement harms, looking at the things that we've been conditioned around self-improvement and the shame cycle that creates, and how that is combated through self-love. And so I would say check that out. I don't plug that enough, but check
Heck
out
yeah.
that TEDx talk.
Yeah, we'll link
And,
to it.
But I recently wrote a poem on grief, since we are in a season where grief comes up with holidays and things like that. It's December as we're recording this, but it's called Everything's Gonna Be Okay.
And actually, let me add to that just before you do.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of people, and it's true, from heart attacks to mental issues during the holidays. But I was talking with somebody who's very, very keyed in on this, and she used to take emergency calls and suicide calls, hotline kind of stuff. And she said, actually, also after the holidays in January, and this is going to air in January, after the holidays is a time to really be aware of what's going on, because that's when the calls spike.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, this is called Everything's Gonna Be Okay. It's been 5 years, and yes, I'm still grieving. I wonder if this pain that I feel in my body will ever leave me. Trying to see both sides of grief, I'm steady straddling the fence. But if I'm being honest, it feels like I woke up from a dream and been in a nightmare ever since. Barely recognize myself. How do you look in the mirror and see a stranger? I lost the safest loves of my life, and everyone remaining feels like danger. I must protect my heart, but I can't stay stuck in the dark. Let me lean in a little. Maybe community will help me ignite a spark. It's time to go to therapy. Maybe I need a somatic release. This pain will not shackle me. I refuse to be defined by my grief. I'll do everything that it takes to illuminate the way, because I believe what my grandmother used to tell me: everything's gonna be okay. Shout out to my grandma. I miss you, baby.
6 years ago today.
5 years ago when she died, but 6 years ago when it was diagnosed, and my grandfather too. They died 6 months back to back, and yes, I'm still grieving. So if you're grieving out there, it is totally normal. There's no time frame on grief. There is no game plan on grief, and how you're dealing with it is how it needs to be dealt with. And just know it will be okay.
Yeah, thank you, Reggie. That's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, when my grandpa died 11 years ago, I didn't deal with it well. Got very drunk at his wake. Came home feeling like garbage, and I went out for a walk just to clear my head. And this butterfly comes and lands on my hat, the bill of my hat. And butterflies, they don't hang out.
Yeah.
This one, it just sat there.
Wow.
For probably 2/3 of a mile that I walked. So probably a good 10 or 15 minutes. Oh my God. And my grandpa downloaded 3 things to me from that. He said, one, he said, I'm okay, which means he's okay. Grandpa is okay where he is. And 2, all this shit you just did to yourself and everything you're going through, you're okay also. Great, talking about grace, because I was feeling shame.
Mm-hmm.
And then 3rd, he said, and it's going to be okay.
Yes.
So I don't know where that came from across time and space, but I do believe that actually happened, because I was there, and and that's what happened.
Wow.
To me. So thank you for sharing that, because grief is a process, and it's not the same for everybody. You don't check that box and then we're done with that.
No, it's not. And I think butterflies and birds are messengers, and I would say look for them. They're speaking to you. They're letting you know that everything's gonna be okay.
Yeah. I mean, one of the oldest stories is the phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
The bird, 500-year-old bird, goes off by itself, then burns itself down, comes back reinvigorated. That's not a story we tell for no reason.
Right.
That's
Exactly.
not like a funny joke. That's like rich, deep, timeless truth in
Yes.
there about who we are or what we have the potential to be.
Yes. Yes.
Let's do it again soon, man.
Let's do it. We can do
Okay.
part 2, part 3,
Let's do
whatever you
part
need.
2.
Hey, you need a co-host?
Actually,
Let's do it.
actually, that would be very net positive.
Oh
Yes.
man, that'd be dope.
All right. Thanks, Reggie. Appreciate
Thank
you being on the show.
Appreciate you. Much love.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Much love.